was the year 1347. Europe stood on the edge of an unseen catastrophe, one that would silence cities, empty villages, and change history forever. Along the coast of Sicily, in the bustling port of Messina, 12 merchant ships quietly dropped anchor. They had sailed from the Black Sea, filled with spices, grain, silk, and something far more dangerous, something invisible, something that would soon be called the Black Death. When dock workers boarded the ships, they were met with horror. Most of the sailors were already dead. Those still alive trembled with fever, covered in black, oozing sores. Their bodies were twisted in pain. Their eyes had a hollow, distant look, as if they had already glimpsed death itself. Within days, the disease spread through the city like fire. People began dying in their homes, in the streets, in churches. At first, no one understood what was happening. Some believed it was a punishment from God for the sins of humanity. Others thought it was the work of the devil, or perhaps the alignment of planets bringing doom to Earth. But the truth was much smaller and far crueler. Inside, the ships had been rats, and on those rats lived fleas carrying a deadly bacterium, Yersinia pestis. It was not divine wrath, but nature's smallest creatures that would bring Europe to its knees. From Sicily, the plague travelled north. It followed the trade routes, through Italy, France, Spain, and England. Wherever there were ships, merchants, or people, there was death. By 1348, the entire continent was infected. Doctors were powerless. Medicine, prayers, and superstition all failed. Many physicians wore strange bird-like masks filled with herbs and flowers, believing the scent would purify the air and protect them from sickness. But the real killer was not the smell. It was the unseen pestilence in the blood. Panic spread faster than the plague itself. Families abandoned their loved ones, afraid to touch or even approach them. Bodies piled up faster than they could be buried. Church bells, once symbols of life and worship, now tolled endlessly for the dead, until even the bell ringers were gone. In the streets, carts rolled by, carrying corpses to mass graves. Grave diggers could no longer keep up. Priests read last rites from a distance, too afraid to come close. In many towns, the silence of death replaced the sounds of daily life. And then came the fear and the anger. People searched for someone to blame. Rumours spread that Jewish communities had poisoned the wells. Across Europe, thousands of innocent Jews were tortured and killed. It was not only a time of disease, it was a time of madness. The plague had infected not just the body, but the human soul. By 1349, the death toll was beyond comprehension. Entire villages vanished. In England, 1 out of every 2 people was gone. In France, entire towns were abandoned. Italy's great cities, Florence, Venice, Genoa, were transformed into silent cemeteries. Chroniclers of the time wrote of streets filled with bodies, of ships drifting at sea with no living crew, of priests blessing hundreds of corpses at once. The Black Death spared no one. Kings and peasants died the same way, sweating, bleeding, suffocating. It was the great equalizer of the Middle Ages, and yet, amid the despair, life tried to continue. Monks wrote down what they saw. Doctors kept studying, hoping to find a cure. Parents whispered prayers as they held their sick children. There was still hope, fragile, flickering, but alive. By the early 1350s, the plague began to fade. No one truly knew why. Perhaps the bacteria had run out of hosts. Perhaps survivors developed resistance. Or maybe nature itself had decided to rest. But the world it left behind was no longer the same. Europe had lost nearly half its population, over 25 million souls. villages were silent. And yet, from the ashes of that tragedy, a new order slowly emerged. With so many workers dead, the survivors gained power. Serfs demanded better conditions. The old feudal system began to crumble. Trade routes shifted, new cities rose, and human curiosity turned once again towards science, art, and progress. Without realizing it, the Black Death had helped pave the way for the Renaissance. But for those who lived through it, the memory never faded. For decades, people spoke in whispers about the time when death walked the earth, when neighbours disappeared overnight, when faith wavered, and hope itself seemed lost. The plague returned several times in the centuries that followed, but none would be as devastating as that first wave. It was more than a disease. It was a reminder of how fragile life is, how quickly civilization can fall silent. Today, nearly 7 centuries later, we can still find its traces. In ancient records, in the mass graves discovered beneath modern cities, and in the quiet echo of its name, the Black Death, a silent apocalypse, a whisper from the past that reminds us, death can come not with thunder, but with silence.